pretty girl. Hey, pretty girl. We'll see you in a little bit, pretty girl. We'll see you in a little bit.
Well, hello. Welcome to my kitchen at the cabin. I am so glad that you could join me today. It is such a beautiful weekend here. It's the first cool weekend of the season. The deer are so frisky. They're just out and about, and we're loving watching them. This morning we got up and it was about 40 degrees, and we wrapped up in blankets and we took our coffee outside and drank it on the front porch and just watched nature do its thing. That is life at its best, I just have to say. This is one of our favorite times of the year. First, because of the deer. We just love that. And second, because it's football season. We love football in Southeast Alabama. And today there's a game on, and we are really looking forward to just kicking back and watching that game. You can see who we're rooting for. You know, I'm an Alabama girl. I always have been. We have a divided family. I will say I have a very soft spot for Auburn. Please, whatever you do, do not tell my husband that. I better hide this video from him. He'll be saying, "What are you talking about?" But I do. You know, I lived in Houston for almost 40 years, and living there, I would root for Alabama, the state of Alabama, any way that I could. And I know that that is not the thing to do, but hey, you know, I just wanted to see our state do well. Today, in anticipation of the game, we're having one of our favorites, and that's Brunswick Stew. The star of the stew is this beautiful pulled pork. Our neighbors in Dothan brought this to us. Tommy and Bev, they are the best neighbors. We are blessed to have fabulous neighbors here at the cabin and back home. And he smoked a huge, beautiful Boston pork butt for us that filled up a 9x13 baking dish and brought it over to us. We've had barbecue sandwiches. We were able to take some over to my aunt and uncle that's homebound, and it was such a blessing to them. Thank you, Tommy and Bev, for that. They thank you for that, and so do we. And I brought some with us, anticipating eating Brunswick Stew during the game. Now let me tell you a little bit about Brunswick Stew. It's basically a big old pot of leftovers. I really think how this was invented was somebody just looked in their refrigerator or their freezer or their pantry and said, I'm just going to add this and that. And that's what they did. And voila, they created something so delicious. And in Southeast Alabama, most of your barbecue restaurants are going to serve this. Even restaurants that aren't barbecue will serve Brunswick Stew. Now, it's traditionally made with pulled pork here in the Southeast, but I've had it with chicken, I've had it with brisket, I've had it with sausage, and it's still delicious. Even a combination of all of those would be wonderful. Now, the base of the soup is chicken broth, and I'm using 3 to 4 cups here. I'm going to add this as I go, and I'll see how my stew begins to thicken up. And I just go as a needed basis. And to the chicken broth, I have got 2 chicken bouillon cubes. I love bouillon cubes. We call them the salt of the South. They are a great way to elevate the flavors of something without adding a lot of different ingredients. I don't have the ability to add a lot of different ingredients when we're here at the cabin because I don't have much space, for one thing. And secondly, I don't keep a lot of things in our freezer because we've lost electricity before, and you know what happens when you lose electricity. You lose everything in your refrigerator and freezer. So we use a lot of pantry items when we come. And so I keep these on hand so that I can elevate whatever it is that I'm doing. This has garlic and onion powder and all sorts of herbs and spices without having to add this, that, and everything else, all wrapped into one. So remember that. Great in green beans, great in so many things. And my other pantry items are canned corn. I'm using shoe peg and yellow corn. I've already drained my cans. And I'm also using a can of lima beans. Don't let that scare you. If you don't like lima beans, use whatever green bean or pea that you like. Brunswick Stew is all about what you enjoy. So if you want green beans, if you want black-eyed peas, I know that's not green, but field peas, sweet peas, whatever you like, use it. We love lima beans, so that's what we're using. And lima beans also have a good bit of starch in them, and that will release in the stew, and it'll help thicken up that base. And also I'm using a can of tomato sauce, just plain old tomato sauce. Now, if I were making this for a crowd or even just for myself, I would make it with diced tomatoes, but my husband enjoys tomatoes, but he doesn't enjoy a chunk of tomato. So since I'm making it for us today, I aim to please, and I'm using what I know he's going to like. Now, last but not least, we have got barbecue sauce, and that is what sets this whole thing apart. It's like a barbecue smoky stew. And I'm using what we think is the best barbecue sauce on the planet, and that's Sonny's. Now, for my Texas peeps that don't have access to Sonny's, use a Sweet Baby Ray's or whatever you like. Whatever type of barbecue sauce that you enjoy. If it's a vinegary type sauce, then use it. We preferably like a sweeter sauce, so that's what I'm using. Now, we'll also use a little bit of salt to this, just a taste, but I won't add that until the very end, if at all. So let's get started on this. I can hardly wait. This smells delicious. I'm heating my Dutch oven up to a medium-high temperature, and I've added just a little bit of oil, and I'm going to add my pulled pork. Now, this is cold, but I want this, hear that sound, to give me some applause, as I say. I want to get some of this fat from this pork into my pan. That is going to make some flavor. All right, this looks great. It's created some of those nice brown bits inside. And what I'm going to do is now I'm going to deglaze my pot with a little bit of this chicken broth. I'm just going to add enough to loosen up this pork. As I said before, I'm going to add the chicken broth as I go because I never know how much liquid or how much fat is in the actual meat that I'm using, so I don't want to add it all at one time. Now, next, I'm going to go ahead and add my tomato sauce. And I'm going to let that heat. All right, this is starting to boil. And now I'm going to add my bouillon cubes. Before I add my vegetables, I want my bouillon cubes to go ahead and dissolve. I don't want them to mistakenly hang on to a vegetable and not dissolve all the way. So I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to start adding my corn, and then last, my lima beans. The lima beans are the softest of the vegetables, so I don't want to add them too soon or they could fall apart. So I'm going to do the others first. Let this simmer for a little bit, and I'll see you back here in a minute. It's already smelling so good. My bouillon cubes have dissolved, my vegetables have been added, and everything is starting to meld together. Now I'm going to add what sets this apart, and that is our barbecue sauce. Now to this pot, I'm going to add approximately a half of a cup. I'm going to eyeball it, and I'm going to start there. And then once my soup or stew begins to really thicken up and come together, I'm going to start tasting it. And that's when I'm going to decide, does it need more salt? Does it need a little bit more barbecue sauce? And also, I'm going to wait to add any more chicken broth. So for now, I'm going to let this simmer. I'm going to put my lid on, and I am going to start on the fried bread. I'll tell you more about that in a minute. Let me get this pushed to the back, and let's start on that delicious cornbread.
Look at this beautiful stew. I've added my chicken broth, and I'm up to about 3 cups. If you want your stew to be thicker, then just add less chicken broth. This will continue to thicken as everything melds together. This is delicious by itself, but it's also wonderful served over some piping hot cheese grits, which I happen to have some left from this morning. This looks so good.
Well, let's get started on this delicious fried bread. Now, as I said, this is not like cornbread. This fried bread uses a corn flour. The texture of this is very, very fine. It's like a flour, just as I said. It's not like cornmeal. It does not have any texture to it or grit. It's completely powdery. And here in the South, we can get cornmeal, fine, extra fine, regular, white, yellow. You can go into the grocery store and you would not believe all of the cornmeal, and it's milled right here in Southeast Alabama. This is a local company. Today I am using Howe's Down Home extra fine enriched white cornmeal. Now this starts with about a cup of cornmeal. So I am just going to put that in my dish here, my handy dandy cup. That's a little bit less than a cup. And I'm gonna go ahead and add about a teaspoon of baking powder. This is going to make this light and fluffy and crispy. My mouth is already starting to water. Can you tell? Now, along with that, I'm using some salt. I would say probably about a teaspoon. And then I think I'll use another spoon for this. About a teaspoon of sugar. Now this isn't going to make it sweet or salty. These flavors kind of neutralize each other, but they definitely give it flavor. Just making sure that that's all mixed together here. Now I'm using bottled water because the recipe calls for cold water. I have no idea why. My grandmother always did it, so that's what I'm doing. So to ensure that I'm getting really cold water, I'm just using bottled water. And I'm going to start with about 1/4 of a cup. And I'm going to stir this together. See this here? And it's starting to make kind of a paste. Now I want this a little looser. So I'm going in and I just added about 2 more tablespoons. And I'm playing with it a little bit. I want this loose but not watery. 1 more tablespoon. And this looks like it's going to be perfect. And I'm going to stir this up, making sure that everything is mixed together. This looks perfect. See this consistency? See that? That is perfect. Now I have my oil heating up, and I've got a cast iron skillet, and I'm using peanut oil. In Alabama, we don't fry with anything except peanut oil. It has a super high smoke rate, and you can get that temperature up really high before it starts smoking. And that is going to ensure that this bread gets so nice and crispy. Now I'm going to take my spoon here, and I'm just going to taste it and make sure that I have enough sugar and salt. That is perfect. That is so good. Well, my oil has heated up, so let's get busy frying. All right, my oil is heated up. I'm going to turn it down just a little bit because this cast iron gets really hot really fast. So once it comes up to temperature, I want to turn it down. Now I have a spoonful, little less than a tablespoon, and I'm going to drop it in my grease. Now these cook up really fast. Just gonna mash it down. Now when my grandmother cooked these, she wouldn't do it with a spoon. She would shape these in her hand, and then she'd put a hole in the middle of them. They were so good. Anytime you have fried fish around here or fried chicken, you are sure to have some fried bread to go along with that. These look perfect. I just want to show you one of these. See how they're frying up? Now again, this doesn't taste anything like a hush puppy, and it is so delicious with this Brunswick stew, and we can hardly wait for the Alabama game to start. I am certainly glad that when my family members started pressuring me to choose one team and stick with it, that I either had to be an Auburn fan or an Alabama fan, and there was no going back. I'm so glad that I chose Alabama because my husband is a die-hard Alabama fan. Oh, there's nobody that loves Alabama more than Jimmy Phillips. I remember the first game that we went to together. We had the best time. It was my first Alabama game, and it was my first college game as an adult. I've been to NFL games, but I had not been to a college game as an adult. And my husband got tickets for us when we were dating. And guess who Alabama was playing? they were playing Texas A&M. And that happens to be what game is on today. It's Alabama and Texas A&M. How cool is that? It was so exciting. We had a flyover and we tailgated with our Bama friends. We just had the best time. Well, these are cooking really well. As you can see, I'm turning my heat back up just a little bit. I don't want them to burn. And I want to show you what they're doing. They created their own hole. You see that? Kind of looks like a little donut. Well, I think that these are perfect. Now, I have a plate here with a paper towel, and I'm just going to strain the ones that are done. Look at this. Do you see that? How beautiful. I can smell that corn. You know, if I had to describe this aroma, I would say in some ways it smells like a corn dog. It has that sweet corn aroma to it, but because the corn is flour, it's not overpowering. You'll just have to try it. I like the really dark, crispy ones. My husband does too. All right, let's go with batch number 2. Here we go. See how many of these that just a little under a cup of cornmeal has made? And you know what? While those are cooking, I'll just taste one of these. What? These are so good. That baking powder gives it just a little bit of an extra crispiness and makes it a little lighter and fluffier. But that crunch. Well, my husband is at the front of the property planting. He is planting some food plots for our deer so that they'll have plenty to eat during the winter time. And he better get here soon. That game's about to start. And I know he's going to be ready for this. I can hardly wait. See you back here in a minute. You've got to make these. All right, baby. You ready to eat?
Ready.
Ready for some football?
I sure am.
Roll Tide.
Roll Tide.
That small. Don't think anybody got a hand on it. That was just a shank. That'll last it from 37 yards out. Still no score here. Tuscaloosa.
That's good.